Hello, welcome to the JimRPG Show. Today is the 29th of May 2020. Now, normally we start off with some gaming news, but today we're going to go ahead with a hardware story. There's a rumor from AMD, so we're going to do that first. So let's get straight into it. Now, this story comes from retired engineer on Twitter, and I don't know if he's actually done the translation, but it's from Digitimes, and I'm just going to read most of this out first. So I've saved a copy here so we can enlarge it. Okay, so retired engineer says TSMC's enhanced 5nm process enters mass production in Q4 ahead of schedule. AMD's new Ryzen first to adopt. PC competitive landscape may usher in the biggest change in 15 years. So previously we've known that AMD on their roadmaps, they talked about their Ryzens for Zen 3 to be out on their 7nm process. And now this report is saying that they're going to skip 7nm and go straight to 5nm. And what that's going to mean, if this rumor is true, is that you're going to get more gains through the enhanced new 5nm process over the 7nm process, and possibly that could mean AMD having even better chips than what they might have been for Zen 3, and could take a further lead in terms of competitiveness for their chips against Intel. So that would probably mean their chips would be way better than the 11th gen Intels that are scheduled to arrive end of this year, start of next year. So that was already going to happen with a 7nm, but with 5nm, that would put it even further ahead. But I'll read the rest of the story now. Okay, so rumor has it that AMD and TSMC have adjusted their foundry blueprints. The Ryzen 4000 series of desktop processors, originally expected to launch at the end of 2020, will now use TSMC's enhanced 5nm process, 5nm plus, instead of 7nm EUV, clearly demonstrating that AMD is now considered a Tier 1 customer for TSMC. This new development confirms news that TSMC, which only recently entered the 5nm era in April, is accelerating its enhanced 5nm process, bringing forward the mass production schedule to Q4. And the enhanced 5nm Ryzen series processors will also put unprecedented pressure on Intel. Both TSMC and AMD declined to comment on rumors. In the first quarter of 2020, AMD benefited from the pandemic, which boosted demand due to a work-from-home economy. PC and server sales exceeded expectations. Ryzen and EPYC series processor shipments were strong, driving first quarter revenue up by 40% compared to the same period in 2019. Earnings were also better than market expectations. So that's kind of saying that they don't mind waiting a little bit longer for their 5nm to come into production because their sales already are quite strong, and it looks as though that they're going to have some new Matisse refresh chips out in the next couple of weeks, maybe to a month, which will refresh the current 3800 and 3900 chips. And they could probably hold out until maybe early start of next year. Okay, so let's skip ahead a little bit. Okay, according to sources in the semiconductor industry, AMD had announced a comprehensive partnership with TSMC for sub-7nm processors, and also confirmed mass production schedules for 7nm, 7nm EUV, 5nm and 3nm products. However, beyond expectations, AMD's performance took a great leap forward over the last 1.5 years. Board, PC and server manufacturers significantly increased their weightage, adoption of AMD products relative to others, in part due to Intel's chip shortages. More importantly, the partnership with TSMC resulted in drastically improved product performance and yield, as well as price competitiveness for AMD, leading to rising shipments and market share quarter after quarter. So I've been seeing online on Twitter, in terms of motherboard numbers, right now, AMD is killing it against Intel. They're selling way more motherboards, motherboards for AMD chips than Intel motherboards. So, and this is like 70-80% to 30% for Intel right now. So AMD have a huge amount of market share for desktop and enthusiast users, and seems like that kind of ties in line with the fact that AMD could possibly just jump straight ahead to 5nm. Now, I'll keep reading this before I make my opinion. In 2020, because of the huge increase in sales, AMD has been urgently chasing after TSMC to expedite orders. The size of those orders were not small, becoming the greatest fallback for TSMC, which got caught in the Huawei ban crisis, making demand and production planning extremely difficult. As a result, TSMC is also adjusting its services for AMD, and in considering the optimum allocation of production capacity, modified the process plans for AMD's products. As understood, TSMC has entered the 5nm era since April. The enhanced version of 5nm will also enter mass production in Q4, ahead of market expectations, and the first customer to adopt it is AMD with its new Ryzen 4000 series processors. AMD's new generation Ryzen 4000 series processor, codenamed Rumour, originally planned to use 7nm EUV, will be unveiled around September-October, but in line with the mass production schedule of TSMC's enhanced 5nm process, will only be launched at end of year or during CES in January 2021. Yeah, so there were a lot of rumors in the last few weeks saying that Ryzen 4000 was on schedule and that it was planned to release by about September. Not the whole line, but at least some products. But now this report is saying that they might just hold off until CES in January 2021. And CES would be a good time for them to release new hardware, because it's a consumer-friendly trade show. And 2021, normally you wouldn't expect people to release things very late into November, December, unless it was something like a console. It's more likely that people would release products in the new year. So then, for example, later on that year, people could say, well, this is the 2021 chip, and they could say that in June. But if you said it was a 2020 chip, then it would seem a little bit older. So that's one reason why they would just release it in the new year. Okay, let me just finish reading the last couple of paragraphs. According to semiconductor industry players, AMD plunked down a lot of money to enter the enhanced 5nm era, hoping to build upon its success and expand its leadership in advanced process technology before Intel's 10nm process fully deployed, and 7nm process is yet to debut, once again capitalizing on the narrative around introduction of advanced process technology and performance efficiency improvements to narrow its market share with Intel. Judging by AMD's current momentum and product performance, the enhanced 5nm Ryzen series processors will put unprecedented pressure on Intel. If Intel does not cut prices or accelerate the introduction of 10nm desktop processors, its empire may be gradually eroded by AMD. Ushering in the biggest change in the global PC platform competitive landscape in 15 years, AMD's market share can be expected to reach historical heights. Separately, Nvidia has finally joined the 7nm bandwagon recently, entering full production in the second half of the year. While 5nm capacity continues to be reserved for Apple and HiSilicon, although the status of HiSilicon's orders after Q4 is unknown due to the heightened US ban on Huawei. So just to go back a little bit, yeah, Intel still dominates the overall market because there are lots of other uses for CPUs, things like data centers. Right now, AMD also has their own in terms of EPYC, the EPYC. However, it seems as though Intel still has a broad enough market share at the moment, even though AMD is winning in terms of desktop. Now, if AMD can get 5nm for data centers and everything, yeah, they could be looking to seriously hurt Intel. But we already know that there have been some samples for their EPYC chips that are 7nm. So in terms of this just being this whole rumor about AMD going to 5nm, yeah, it's I would probably say that it's unlikely that Ryzen 4000 would be on 5nm. They would really have to scrap all of their existing 7nm plans and their production and their schedule, and go to, and then also, you know, delay 3 or 4 months worth when they could easily just launch it in September anyway. So I would say that it's probably, I would file this under unlikely that it would be 5nm, because again, like if they were just to release Vermeer this year, September, and then next June they release their 5nm, that would also work well for them anyway. So they could just hit 2 birds with 1 stone. People upgrading this year, and then in 9 months time they would also upgrade. Well, some people could upgrade again to Zen 4 on 5nm, or it may be like even a midterm refresh Zen 3 on 5nm. But I think if this was true, then we'll definitely hear more about it in the next couple of weeks. But at this stage, it seems like it's we need more information before we can likely say that is true. And I think if this was 5nm, then Intel would probably be in a lot of trouble right now, because they would be really far behind. If AMD were to come out with 5nm Vermeer chips, AMD has already got all of the market share on desktop anyway, and is looking like maybe like 60-40% market share in terms of AMD versus Intel right now. So the Ryzen chips are just basically killing it. So I think, and if they were to come out with Ryzen 4000 on 5nm, we'd be looking at 80-20 maybe, and then it would really just be Intel's highest chip, which would be like the 11900K, for example, that would sell, and then all of the chips underneath that would basically be all AMD, and there wouldn't be any, but and Intel wouldn't be able to sell any of those other chips. So yeah, that's the big rumor that if this is 5nm, it could probably go into January, and if it's not, if it's staying on 7nm, then it will probably come out later this year, maybe September, October. Alright, okay, so and there is a Videocardz article on this Ryzen 4000 on 5nm, which they took from retired engineer. But as you can see, their roadmap previously was that Zen 3, which is Vermeer, was on 7nm. Okay, our next story, back to games. Take-Two, fourth quarter and full fiscal year earnings. So this is about the number of units that Grand Theft Auto 5 has sold, and Take-Two's other games. So Grand Theft Auto 5 has sold 130 million units. Red Dead Redemption 2 has sold 31 million units, and The Outer Worlds 2.5 million units. Borderlands 3, 10 million units. NBA 2K20 is at 12 million units. Yeah, so, well, first of all, Grand Theft Auto 5, 130 million units. That is just absolutely insane amount of copies. I don't think even, maybe only Tetris has sold that many, and that was because it was a pack-in with Game Boy. Maybe Super Mario World has sold that many number of units over its entire lifetime. GTA 5 has been selling for, well, it was released in 2013, so that would make it 7 years. So it easily sells 15 million units a year. And when you think about it, like many games don't even get to 15 million units. Maybe the top 5 or 6 games on each console get to about 15 million units. Like on the Nintendo Switch, we see Zelda and Animal Crossing and Smash Brothers get to like 15-20 million units. And things like The Last of Us get to about 20 million units. God of War, 10 million units. Spider-Man, 12-15 million units. So for GTA 5 to get 130, that's the scale that we're talking about when we're talking about number of copies. Like 130 million, it just dwarfs basically everything. And you can see why they can put as much time as they want into a GTA 5. You could put 5 or 6 years onto this, and if it sells 130 million units, it's just not a big deal. 5 or 6 years is just not a big deal. Other games that you put 5 or 6 years into, say for example like The Last of Us, and you sell 15-20 million units, that's a good result. But if you put 5 or 6 years into GTA 5, you get maybe 5-6 times a result as The Last of Us. That's just totally insane. And Red Dead Redemption 2 is also interesting. Obviously, Take-Two and Rockstar have their fans that just buy the same games or buy the games that they make. And Red Dead Redemption 2, after it's been out on the market for 2 years, is selling at a similar rate to Grand Theft Auto 5. You can see 130 million units, that's about 15 million to 20 million units in 7 years. And Red Dead Redemption 2 is about the same rate, about 15 million units a year. And I would say that the theme, or at least the setting, is not as general as GTA 5. Like, more people could be able to get into GTA 5 because it's a more modern type of game, and Red Dead Redemption 2 is set in the 1800s. It's a historical setting, so not as many people would be able to get into that as much, I would say. So I think it's done extremely well to sell that many number of units. Borderlands 3 has also done really well. 10 million units, and lots of people are still playing the game right now. So it's done a lot better than their previous game. I forgot what they were, but they made Battleborn, and they so it's a return to form, I think, for Randy Pitchford. Okay, so, and also NBA 2K20, 12 million units, and they obviously sell about 10 to 12 million units a year. So all the NBA 2K games are still going extremely strong, and it just seems as though nobody really minds about like things like Ultimate Team or I'm not sure what it's called on NBA, but like the cards that you get in those games. So I guess for all the people that are fighting it, those microtransactions, all of that is probably here to stay. They make so much money from it, I can't see how they would take it away now. For them to take it away, then people really just have to stop using it. And I didn't forget the Outer Worlds, but I think that's a really good result for the Outer Worlds. I believe it's made by Obsidian, before they were shortly purchased after by Microsoft. But 2.5 million units from a company that I would say probably is just an A list or A quality title. That's not A quality title, but like, you know how they say AAA games. Well, this is an A game, I guess. I think it's done extremely well. 2.5 million units. These are numbers like even the first few weeks of Final Fantasy VII Remake was 3.5 million units sold. So Take-Two is doing incredibly well. And there was another rumor this week, I don't have the link for it, but somebody was looking at the results, the financial year results, and they saw that there was a massive amount of spending for marketing in 2023 or 2024. So that kind of triggered them to think that it might have been that could be a potential release date for Grand Theft Auto 6. Now, just quickly going over this, I think 2023 and 2024 is really late for Grand Theft Auto. That would mean that it's been about 10 to 11 years since their last title, Grand Theft Auto 5, and 5 to 6 years after Red Dead Redemption 2. Now, I think 5 years is probably the amount of time that they had between GTA 5 and Red Dead Redemption 2. So it kind of makes sense that it would be 5 years, but 10 years for a GTA 5, another GTA title, I feel like that's really long, and I think it would make more sense to bring it a little bit earlier. Now, one reason why they may have it so late in the generation, 3 to 4 years after the console's launch, is that they want to build up a steady base of console users, so that they get everybody playing at once. So it's much better for them to launch it later when there's a console install base of, say, like around 60 to 80 million units out there, and everyone buys it at once and everyone talks about it at once, and that's what they want. So I don't expect to see GTA 6 at least next year, 2020, 2021. But honestly, I think it makes sense for them to bring it out earlier, 2022. And the thing is, what we saw with GTA 5 is, okay, they've got an unlimited amount of time that they can spend on it, because they're going to sell, like, for example, GTA 5 sell 130 million units anyway, so they can take as long as they want. But if they come out earlier, there's a lot less competition at the time as well. So in terms of, say for GTA 5, when they came out later, there were developers that were putting things into their other games, and then GTA 5 wouldn't look as good, so then they would have to go back in and rework GTA 5. So obviously putting in little things constantly would add in time to the development process. So I think it's much better for GTA 6 to come out earlier on in the cycle, just like GTA 3 and GTA 4. They came out early, it was like 1 or 2 years before GTA 3 and GTA 4 came out on the PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 3. So I don't see why they it makes a lot more sense from a development point of view, but if they want to spend as long as they want on it, there's no reason why they couldn't just wait till like 3 or 4 years after the console's launch to get a bigger console base. I would like to see them bring it out a bit earlier, because 10 years between drinks is a long time. Alright, so okay, this was from a couple of weeks ago, sort of anyway. So on Resetera, Mafia Trilogy, the thread was made on May the 13th, but the full reveal was on May the 19th. And, you know, I didn't expect it to look this good. Now, I don't play Mafia, but this looks pretty amazing what they've done with the remaster, which is more of a remake. So they say this is... back up a little bit. So it's the Mafia Trilogy, and what you get is Mafia 2 and Mafia 3. Mafia 3 Definitive Edition is out, is already available, and Mafia 2 will be available soon, I believe. When it comes out, they didn't say when, but Mafia 3 Definitive Edition is already out. I think Mafia 3 is basically the game as it is right now, plus some minor enhancements and all of the DLC. And Mafia 2 will be the actual remaster of the 2010 game. However, Mafia, the first one, is a complete remake, basically. And as you can see in the photos, yeah, this looks really good. This looks like they've gone and just redone the entire game, basically to current gen standards, but to even like high-end PC standards. You can just tell from like all of the reflections and all the detail in here that everything looks like it's a high-end PC game for today's computers. So I think this one is definitely one to keep an eye on. I'll just read this out a bit out here because I think this is interesting. Oh, okay, so Mafia 2 Definitive Edition and Mafia 3 Definitive Edition are out now. Okay, Mafia 1 Definitive Edition will release on August 28. So buying all three games together as the Mafia Trilogy costs $60. Otherwise, Mafia Definitive Edition is $40. Mafia 2 and 3 are $30 each. If you own Mafia 2 on Steam, you'll get Mafia 2 Definitive Edition at no cost. If you own Mafia 3, you get it at no cost. And if you own a combination of these titles, you can get a special upgrade offer to complete your trilogy at a discount. So I would probably assume that if you own 2 and 3, maybe you'd get Mafia Definitive Edition for $30 if you get a bit of a discount to complete the trilogy. But yeah, this looks really good. So I'm really impressed with this, and I believe it's Take-Two. This will absolutely, no doubt, do well. People love open world games, and yeah, there's just something about this aesthetic that I think is going to please a lot of people. Now, gameplay, I'm not 100% sure, but this game looks good. And another game that's about to come out is Saints Row The Third, and it's a remaster. Now, it's not a complete remake, but Digital Foundry, they were really impressed with this, and after watching their 25-minute video the other day, I've got to say, yes, I'm also really impressed with Saints Row The Third. It basically adds brand new everything to the game. in terms of graphical enhancements, all the textures have been redone. The game looks completely different. The lighting, the reflections, the shadow, everything has been redone, and it looks really good. And for people who played the original games, PS3 and Xbox 360, obviously the games then were capped at 30 frames per second, but now on Xbox One X, they've basically unlocked the frame rate, so it runs at about 60, not 60 all the time, but watching the Digital Foundry video, it looks like it dips between 55 and 60, which is still really good. I guess they wanted to do that because when the Xbox Series X comes out, yeah, it will definitely be 60, above 60. And PS4 Pro, the performance is okay. It's mid 40s, so yeah, it's around 45, which is better than 30. And if you have one of those variable rate refresh monitors, then this game should look okay. But if you have the choice between PS4 Pro and the One X, yeah, definitely the 60 FPS. The PS4 Pro is at about 4 teraflops and the One X is 6. So yeah, that's basically why it's doing 60 and the PS4 Pro is doing 40. But I think this is another remaster to at least, go and check out on YouTube, because yeah, this one they looks like they've done a lot of work on this, and it looks really good. So Sea of Thieves, which was previously a Xbox only game and also on the Microsoft Store on PC, is now coming to Steam. And honestly, I think that's a really good thing for Microsoft. Now we're starting to see this a lot from the console makers. Sony, Nintendo. Nintendo's making mobile games. Sony's putting PS Now, and even in their advertising on their website for PS Now, they're saying, play your PlayStation games on PC. And soon enough, like I think Horizon Zero Dawn will also be on PC as well. So Sony is putting games on PC. Yes, you could technically say that Guerrilla is a third party, but in the past they've always been a first party. Right, so there's some questions unanswered here. Will the game be locked to 30 frames per second? No, frames per second will be uncapped. Do I get the game for free on Steam if I already own it? No, players on Xbox One and Windows 10 will not receive entitlement to a free Steam copy. However, crossplay breaks down barriers by enabling new Steam players to crew up easily with existing players on Xbox One and Windows 10, which is fine. I think yes, it would be nice if they give you a Steam copy, but I don't think it makes that much of a difference really. But I'm glad games are coming to more stores, which is something that PC gamers have been talking about for a really long time. The game should just be on all stores, and it shouldn't matter what hardware you run it on. You just have some hardware and then or platform, and you should be able to get that game on it. That's what software should be about, and that's what PC is supposed to bring. And we've seen, I guess, some stores have their exclusives, and there's not much I guess gamers can do about that. But it's always nice to see when the companies and the corporations decide to put it out on all platforms, because actually that makes the most sense. If you want your audience to hit as big of a target audience as possible, you need everyone playing at once. You need everyone talking about it at once, and there shouldn't be any exclusive periods, because that only hurts your game in the end. Alright. Jason Schreier, formerly of Kotaku, now with Bloomberg, he writes that there's going to be a PlayStation 5 game reveal event for next Wednesday, June the 3rd. So it's not long to go, and they should have said something by now. If it's Wednesday next week, today is Friday, that only leaves 6 days for people to get, plan themselves out. But I guess it would probably be in an online video, kind of like the Microsoft Xbox Inside Xbox Showcase, or the Nintendo Directs. So they will finally show up PlayStation 5 games, possibly next week. Now, I think it's important that we compare games that are coming out at the same, more or less the same time. So if PlayStation 5 shows games that are coming from like 3 years later, well, of course they're going to look better than the games that are going to be coming out this holiday, which is what Microsoft showed, which is really funny because I kind of think that Microsoft has been pretty bad in terms of their marketing, not just for the Xbox Series X, but like for quite a while now. Even with their Xbox One, they really bungled and lost the generation because of their marketing. So people need to keep that in mind, that if PlayStation 5 shows something, it's got to be comparable to what Microsoft is showing. They need to be released within a similar time frame. That's how you do a proper comparison. That's what Digital Foundry does when they compare two games side by side. It's the same game, so it can be accurately compared. Alright, one thing that Microsoft has done well is their backwards compatibility program. Ever since they've moved to the Xbox One, and they basically had the PC architecture, they've decided that they're going to try and convert all of their older games to run on the Xbox One. And with the Xbox Series X, they can do way more of that, and that's kind of what they're doing. They're doubling down on existing fans, I guess would be the best way to put it. The core gamers who really value backwards compatibility, probably more so than the casual gamer who just buys games once every so often and then sells them afterwards. Backwards compatibility, people who keep all of their games, especially all their physical ones, and don't sell them. That's what this is. That's who this is speaking to. So they decided to write a blog article and give a bit more information about backwards compatibility on Xbox Series X. So this tweet is about Xbox Series X. They say it's the most compatible console ever, that it has no boost mode, no downclocking, and the power of the Xbox Series X for thousands of games ready at launch. The full details is on this page. So I'll just read just a tiny paragraph. Okay. So all games play better on Xbox Series X. Not only should gamers be able to play all of these games from the past, but they should play better than ever before. Backwards compatible games run natively on the Xbox Series X hardware, running with the full power of the CPU, GPU, and the SSD. No boost mode, no downclocking, the full power of the Xbox Series X for each and every backward compatible game. This means that all titles run at the peak performance that they were originally designed for, many times even higher performance than the games saw on their original launch platform, resulting in higher and more steady frame rates and rendering at their maximum resolution and visual quality. Backwards compatible titles also see significant reductions in in-game load times from the massive leap in performance from our custom NVMe SSD, which powers the Xbox Velocity architecture. as I play through my personal backlog as part of our internal testing. All of the incredible games from Xbox One and earlier play best on Xbox Series X. Right, so the PS5 has 3 modes. So it has a PS4 mode, a PS4 Pro Legacy mode, and a PS5 mode. And basically what that means is, like, if a game, you could put the game in and it will probably run on PS4 mode if there hasn't been any updates on it. And what that's going to do is it will downclock the CPU and the GPU, and it will play it exactly like the PS4 experience. Give or take, like maybe it'll have remove some of the stuttering, for example, but by and large the performance will be pretty close to the PS4 performance. And then there's a PS4 Pro Legacy mode, and that's where they've gone, in terms of the PS4 Pro, gone back to some titles and did some updates on them so they run better for the PS4 Pro. And then the PS5 would be if they updated it to use the full CPU and GPU capabilities of the PS5, and that will make the old PS4 game run a lot better. Now, it really depends if that game is going to which mode it's going to run in. Say, for example, there might be an extremely old game that nobody's touched, that nobody wants to play ever again. Like, say, for example, like, I don't know, Formula 1 2012 or something like that. Maybe that doesn't get an update. So when you put that disc in, it'll only play on a PS4 mode. Now, what the Xbox Series X is doing is that it's saying, well, you can use all of the processing power of the Xbox Series X, the 8 cores at 3.8 gigahertz and the 12 teraflops to make your game run faster, and there's going to be for all games. Now, I don't know how that's all going to play out. Maybe there'll be bugs and stuff, but they're banking on the fact that the architecture between the Xbox One and the Xbox Series X is really similar, that they can do this and not run into trouble. So they're basically saying if the old game ran at 1080 and 30 frames a second, now if you play the same game and you the processor basically scales it up. So now they're saying if it was 1080p 30 frames a second previously, and now you're able to use the full power of the Xbox Series X, then hopefully it will run at whatever resolution, maybe 4K, and it can run at 60, whatever the unlocked frame rate will be, and hopefully it will be higher than 60 frames a second. So that's what they're doing with all of the games, and they want this across their whole library of games. They're not saying it will work on every single game, but they're basically that's the I guess process that they're going to allow all games to use the full power of the CPU, GPU, and it's designed into the architecture of the Xbox Series X. So I think Xbox Series X, it will probably be better, but we don't know the results yet. So until we see these backwards compatibility games in action, and all I can do is take their word for it that they're going to all play great, that this would probably be the better option, because you can play your old 30 frames per second games now in 60 frames per second, whereas PS5, if it's in PS4 mode, it'll still be in 30 frames per second. So this will probably be the better outcome for gamers. Now, there was one thing they said here, and I'll just quickly go over. They say no boost mode and no downclocking. So what that means is that the CPU, there's 8 cores currently, and it operates at 3.8 gigahertz, but it only operates at 3.6 gigahertz with simultaneous multi-threading (SMT). But the older games, they didn't use SMT on the Xbox One. There was no such thing, so they only ever used the cores. So Microsoft is saying, well, if you turn off the SMT, then you can run it at the full speed, which is 3.8 and not 3.6. So for most of all of the backwards compatibility games, they're switching off the SMT and then just running with the 3.8 gigahertz the whole time. Well, I think that probably won't make that much of a difference because it's only about 2.2 gigahertz, but it depends on testing, how much that 2.2 is actually going to be. It might not just scale evenly at like say 0.2, so like 5%. It might not be 5% extra, it could be more. But they're saying, they will just use the cores part only and not the SMT. And the no boost mode, no downclocking. So basically, it's going to run at the 3.8 gigahertz the whole time. So it won't be, say, like the PS4 where it downclocks to like 2 gigahertz and run it like a PS4. Xbox Series X runs at 3.8 gigahertz. It won't run at the old Xbox One CPU speed of like 2 or 2.3 gigahertz or whatever it was. Right. Where were we? Right, so Xbox. So another Xbox story. Not really a story, but Phil Spencer, the head of Xbox, is on Reggie Fils-Aime. Reggie's the former head of Nintendo. He's on his podcast, and this is already out. I haven't actually checked it out, but I thought I would mention it because this sounds really interesting. So it'd be good to get a take on how these, I guess, leaders see things from their perspective. Reggie's been in the industry for like for a long time. I think he was head of Xbox for at least 10 years, if not more. Phil, he started last generation, partway through Xbox One when Don Matrick left. So I think this is going to be, but Phil's been there since the old Xbox days. So I think this is going to be really interesting. Check this podcast out, and I'll leave a link in the description below so you can get to it. Street Fighter 5 is announcing that they have a new season and it's going to be their final one. Now, they said that they're planning a final season 5 or V, which will add 5 more fighters to the roster and 3 new stages also being planned. Now, they didn't say exactly when this was going to be, but you can kind of assume that there's probably not going to be a Street Fighter 6 next year. At least that's what everyone's saying in the comments below on this thread. It looks like Street Fighter 6 is probably going to be a 2022 game. Now, I don't know about you, but I always thought that Street Fighter 5 probably bungled, I guess, the way that the game should have come out in. Because it felt like to me that when Street Fighter 5 came out, it was really short on content. But they had their perspective that they wanted to do DLC. But it always felt like that wasn't what the fans wanted. They wanted like a Street Fighter and then a Championship Edition, an Arcade Edition. So a couple of updates rather than DLC that would come out periodically. And I think that hurt sales a lot at the start because a lot of the talk was about how the game was going to be delivered and not if the game was any good. And people who played Street Fighter 5 always says it was great. So it really could have built on Street Fighter 4. Street Fighter 4 got a huge reception, and I know that everyone was playing Street Fighter 4. I don't know if they all went back to play 5, or it grew their audience from 4, but 5 always seemed like that there were more or less the same amount of people playing as 4. So I hope for Street Fighter 6 that they go back to doing it in packs, like and releasing it as individual games. At least that's what I feel like, and that's what people want. All right. So there's some more hardware news, and I think this is worth mentioning. AMD Ryzen 3900X, which is the 12-core 24-thread processor, is now $410 USD, and I just think, and Videocardz saying that it's there to compete with the Core i9-10900K, which just released and just had reviews in the last week, which reviewed really well, by the way, and people are saying it's the best gaming CPU, or the fastest one at the moment. It's but AMD Ryzen 3900X is 12 cores, 24 threads, and AMD is cutting their price on that to compete with Intel, which is the i9-10900K, which is 10 cores and 20 threads. Now, the i9 is $495, I believe, and and now the AMD Ryzen 9 is $410 USD. Now the i9 still leads it by probably about 10%, I would say. Oh, here we go. So in Hardware Unboxed review, the 10900K was on average 7% faster in games over 3900X, while offering 12% lower multi-threaded performance in other applications. Now, there was a bigger gap for 1080p, where the games were GPU limited and not CPU limited. But as you get down to, say, like 1440p and 4K, the games are more GPU limited, so then the CPU starts to matter more, and the differences between the 3900X and the 10900K go down. So if you are on 1440p or 4K, there's not as much difference between a 3900K to a 10900K. And I think that's really interesting because I think, like, if you're an enthusiast, then you're probably on 1440p or 4K. If you're not a competitive gamer, if you're a competitive gamer, maybe you're already on 4K anyway. If you're on 4K, then the difference should be irrelevant for the 10900K and the 3900X and the 3950X, which means to say that there's no point in spending the extra $100 on the 10900K if they're both going to be the same. If they both have the same performance, why spend the $100? Plus, you get 2 more cores on the 3900X and 4 more threads. You get 12 cores, 24 threads. And if I were to build a computer like today, right this minute, which I wouldn't, because I want to wait for the new CPUs to come out in another 6 months. But if I was to build one today, yeah, it would definitely be the 3900X for $410 US. That's a steal. And I know Tech Deals on YouTube agrees with me. He's been, well, I'm the one that agrees with him. He's been the one talking about 3900X as a deal. 3900X at $410, or the 3700X at $300, or the 3600 at $200. For an extra $200 to go from the 3600 to the 3900X, yeah, is a no-brainer. Like you'll definitely just put in the $200 to go up to the 3900X if you had that extra $200. Now, sometimes, you know, when you build the 3900X, then you start to think, well, I want a better case, I want better memory, I want more hard drive space, and all of that other stuff. So it's not just $200. It would probably be $300-400. But if you had the money, yeah, I would get the 3900X. But in saying all of that, I would probably wait until the NVIDIA 30 series came out, at least, if not the AMD Navi. And they may well do, if you're going to be waiting for VMware Ryzen 4000, which may be September, which may be January, if you're going to be waiting for that, yeah, who knows what will come out in that time. Maybe AMD Navi will come out too. And then you could see better pricing on parts. But I think, yeah, not the best time to build a computer right now, but it would still be interesting to keep a lookout on pricing in general, because people will be wanting to get rid of their inventories, and you know, maybe you can score a deal on this 3900X at $200. Why not? Okay, and lastly, I just wanted to mention that Asus and all the other manufacturers like Gigabyte and ASRock, MSI, they're all announcing their B550 motherboards. This was published 21st of May, but these motherboards will be in stock by about June, July. And I think the most important thing here is that AMD, in their X570 chipset in their motherboards, they already had PCI Express 4 lanes, and they weren't in the B450 motherboard. So the B450 was basically the mid-tier motherboard, and in the past AMD also used to have like an A320 as well as like a really cheap end motherboard that, you know, you'd build for like an office PC or something like that, and then the B450 would be their mid-tier, and X570 would be the high tier with like more, I guess, added features, better power delivery and all of that sort of thing. And anyway, what's interesting about the B550 is that they're bringing PCI Express 4. And I wanted to mention this because, say you're a mid-tier gamer who's looking to build a machine that's going to, last as long as possible, right? And you're looking ahead to the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X, and you see that the consoles have the new SSDs, and on the PS5 you have a throughput of 5.5 gigabytes per second, and Xbox Series X is 2.4. Now the current Gen 3 NVMEs, they can do 2.4 to about 3, but you'll need a Gen 4 to do 5.5. And that's what PCI Express 4 brings. It brings much higher NVMe Gen 4 SSDs, so that you can use them, and then they'll be much faster than the Gen 3 ones. So if you wanted to build a computer that was going to match up to a PS5, you'd really be looking at the B550 motherboards. So don't buy the B450 if you want to get to where the PS5 and the Xbox Series X is going. At the very least, buy the B550 so you can put in the PCIe 4. And, you know, maybe in a year or two it will get outdone by the PCI 5, but at least you'll be future-proof for at least a year. And they also note that the B550 motherboards enable 20 general-purpose PCIe 4 lanes from third-generation AMD Ryzen CPUs. Both the primary PCIe X16 and M2 slots on all of our B550 boards offer PCIe 4 connectivity. Third-gen Ryzen chips also let us tap as many as 4 USB 3.2 Gen 2 ports running at up to 10 gigabits per second direct from the CPU. The B550 silicon itself gets an upgrade to PCIe 3 connectivity for its built-in lanes. And AMD has already confirmed that future chips based on the Zen 3 architecture will drop right in. Those upgrades make B550 a tantalizing platform for mainstream builders the world over. Yeah, so the thing is, B550, again, Zen 3 is not out. Zen 3 may be out in September, maybe January. This is Ryzen 4000. So this applies to the new Ryzen 4000 as well. Like if you were to buy the Ryzen 4000, yeah, it would be problematic to get the B450 because then you have to do a BIOS upgrade yourself. So it's much better to just get the B550 because they say that you can just drop the Ryzen 4000 straight into the board. But if you were to buy it now, I don't know how much, whether it'd be worth it to drop it, like buy a Zen 2 chip, like a Ryzen 3000 chip, and then buy another chip again, a Ryzen 4000 chip, unless you were doing something like a Ryzen 3300X or 3100, a really cheap 3100 to tide you over, and then get a really strong one, a 4900X later on. That would make sense. Yeah, so the B550, I think the biggest change is that there'll be PCI 4 gens slots, and that you'll be able to run a much faster SSD on it. Right, okay, so that's going to do it for today. Big show. Hope you enjoyed it. Please, if you like the show, consider subscribing to us, like the video, and yeah, hope to see you in the next one. Thanks.